This is the Gospel Revolution.
Since you're knocking on the door, you're begging to come in, yeah. Unaware that all the while love's been knocking from within. You are the love you see, a perfect yet unique, righteous, holy.
Here's the founder and president of the Gospel Revolution, Michael Lilborn Williams.
Well, thank you for that wonderful greeting, Daniel Thomas Rouse. How are you today?
I am good, and I have a very important question for you today, Mr. Williams.
Uh-oh, on the air?
On the air. Will you be my Valentine?
Oh, well, of course.
Well, happy Valentine's Day to you and to all of our GRs around the world.
And now I have to say, will you be my Valentine?
I will be your Valentine.
I know of a lot of disappointed people out there now. Oh, man. Yeah. Happy Valentine's Day, guys and girls and everybody. Why does Valentine's Day have to be anything other than just letting people know that you love them, you care about them? You don't need a special day to do that. But boy, no. Daniel sure took advantage of this one, didn't he?
Yes.
And we are glad that he did. We want you to know we don't say it a whole lot. We do love you. We care about you. Daniel, I just don't say I love you all the time. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. It just almost becomes a worn out word. My daughter's real bad about it. And it's just like, you can't leave the house. You can't step out the door. You can't hang up the phone. And I know a lot of people do it, so I'm not criticizing you. I'm just telling you, you irritate the hell out of me with it. But, I love for people to know that I love them through what I do. A lot of people who say, I love you, I love you, I love you, really sometimes don't really show that. So we love you and we are showing it.
Yeah. I know Evelina comes up to me sometimes and she says, I love you, Daddy.
Aw.
And I just smile at her sometimes and I say, thank you. And then she's like, what? You don't love me?
See, she's already learned the trick. It's, the little passive aggressive thing that comes along with it. That's wonderful, Daniel. That's what a good way to be able to teach your children. Sometimes people just don't love you. So. And I'm just teaching you how to accept it from somebody who does love you.
They're so cute. They say, I'll say one of the things I always tell them, I said, I love you and I think you're so cute. And they look at me and say, oh, we love you too. And you're so handsome.
Aw. Well, I still think you're cute, so.
Well, thank you. Oh, well, moving along.
Quickly.
For those of you who love us, we want to remind you that this is the final plea that we're going to send out for the pledge drive.
Yes.
So rather than just telling us with your swelling words how much you love us, how about showing us that you love us and love the mission of the Gospel Revolution, and that is to get this life-changing, powerful message in the ears of as many people as we can around the world. And how in the world can you do that? You can do that through your financial support. We do this once a quarter, and we talk about it for about 4 weeks in a row, and just encourage you to be a part of it. We are still looking to hit our goal of getting 20 people to give $100 a month to help boost up our monthly partnership. So simply, would you be our Valentine and help us with $100 a month? If that's something that you can do, we would greatly appreciate it.
You know, Daniel, a lot of people have been very kind. People are calling Hazel and also calling me. And
I was wondering if you scared him away.
I know. Yeah, they deign to approach, but the really sweet thing is we've had, I think, 4 people who have either initiated or upped their monthly. So that's 4. So we still have a few more to go.
Yeah.
Now we have had 3 people to contribute $1, $2, and $3,000. And so that does help, and we're very appreciative because it helps relieve the moment. But what I'm trying to do is to get our budget to operate off of its monthly income, not its quarterly income. And the quarterly income should be a boost, not a constantly backfilling and going back and paying off things. So if we can increase that much, we'll be with the expenses that we have, and we are frugal with our expenses. So we have less than $100,000 a year come in. I haven't seen what it was for last year, but it has not been over 100,000 in probably 3 years, I guess. And anybody can tell you that no matter what you're doing, running any type of a corporation on under $100,000 a year, you're not out, staying at the Ritz-Carlton every day. So I try to just stay once in a while.
So if you want to be one of the 20 or you want to help in any way that you can, pick up that phone. You can call Michael at
832-318-9339.
Or you can go to gospelrevolution.com and hit the donate button. And once again, we're just truly grateful and thankful. We love every one of you, and we appreciate you standing along our side and helping us with this mission. I don't think I can say it enough. Thank you for all of you longtime Gospel revolutionaries out there who are responsible for me hearing the gospel.
Gosh.
And, that was... I lose count of how many years now. It's approaching 10 years now.
Good Lord.
That I have since I first heard Michael and Don and some of the others on the podcast and started getting the gospel. And wow, I'm so thankful. And so I'm so free.
Yeah, it's and that is just even a difficult term to explain. When you are free, it covers so many dimensions in so many ways that it's just unbelievable. I sent you a little tagline. I think they probably already see it I've already seen it on Facebook. But I sent Daniel this little thing. I thought maybe it'd be good to post and put, what is Christianity? And something like, it is all of the attempts. It is an expression of all the attempts to make up for what Jesus failed to do at the cross.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's what Christianity is. I could not describe everything that pertains to Christianity is an attempt to make up for what Jesus failed to do in their eyes. You want to know the difference between the Gospel Revolution and Christianity? One is absolutely convinced that Jesus Christ succeeded at everything he came to do. And the other one, Christianity, literally thinks that he failed at everything he came to do, because they think he came to make them healthy and wealthy and prosperous. And that's not what Jesus came to do. Yet he has been lowered to that. And everything that he did come to do is completely dismissed by Christianity.
I just watched a video the other day. This guy was talking about all the different denominations of Christianity. It was just a short, TikTok video or Instagram video, whatever it was. He talked about how there are, tens of thousands of denominations of Christianity. And he says, but what do they all have in similarity? And I was curious to follow through his thought. And so he went through the, how do you say it? The Nicene Creed, where it talks about how they believe in Christ. Jesus is the Christ. He is the Son of God. They believe in the God of the Bible. They believe that he was born of a virgin, even some Christians are departing from that
Yeah.
belief.
All of our mystic friends have done that.
And that he died for the sins of the world, and that he rose again. And then the last one is that he's coming again. And I thought, you know what? We can agree all the way up to that one.
Yeah.
Because he's not coming again, because he already came. And just 2 weeks ago, we did that. We opened up Genesis chapter 49, and we talked about the last days.
Yeah.
People have misplaced that last days because they're waiting for a second coming.
Boy.
I mean, just talk about freedom, just to be free from a second coming. Oh,
yeah.
How wonderful is that?
When you are teaching, believing, expecting a second coming, you are clearly stating that you are convinced that Christ failed at his first attempt.
Yep.
And the rest of the ones on the list, all we'd have to do is ask them, died for sin. Did he die and take away sin? Oh, no, sin's still here. So we would agree in statement with the rest of them, but one line is all you'd have to say to find out that we are not Christians.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they do not believe that he took away the sin of the world, even though it says that.
Yeah.
And they simply do not believe that by him even being born of a virgin, that his sinlessness was based on the fact he was born of the Spirit. His sinlessness was not because he kept all the law.
Yeah.
And they think that Jesus just never broke the law. Well, I've got news for you. The New Testament says he broke the law.
Mm-hmm.
And repeatedly. I won't go into some of the graphics I used to when I was trying to get people's attention and break down that idiocy. I used to present scenarios of what Jesus could have been doing and still been the savior of the world.
Yeah.
But that kind of shocked people a little bit. When you're talking about Jesus visiting houses of ill repute and still being the perfect sacrifice. But the fact of it is, he would have still been the perfect sacrifice, regardless of anything that he would have done, because the perfect sacrifice was sealed before the foundation of the world. And at his conception, it ruled out any possibility that he would ever participate in sin, regardless of his actions. Folks, that's where our understanding is. We now cannot participate in sin regardless of our actions. Man, you already got more gospel than you deserve to hear, right?
You know, that statement reminded me, and I think this will answer his question. We got a question from Mel Martin along those lines about, we had talked a few weeks ago about the knowledge of good and evil. And he's in full agreement, sin is gone. But we still have this choice to walk out evil or walk out good versus evil. And we had talked about that, about how if you're even walking out evil, that righteousness still remains.
Yeah.
And it's still there. And so do we have a choice between walking out good and evil? Yeah, of course we do.
Yeah.
Is there any spiritual implications or condemnation that comes if we walk out an evil life? No, there's not. But we do have the knowledge now. We do contain the knowledge. And that's the whole point. Is the first creation didn't have the knowledge, and they couldn't operate within that knowledge, even if they had it.
Yeah.
But now we have that knowledge, and we can work within that world. We can know what is good. We can know what is evil, and we can still navigate through life just as God did.
That's what the new creation does. It now navigates through life as the new creation with the full knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah.
And that means that we can do something good, and we can do good, and we can resist and stand against evil. The problem with Christianity is, in its attempt to do that, it stands for evil and resists good.
Yeah.
Hello? Somebody explain that one to me.
Come on.
So, yes, thankfully, we have Christ was born of a virgin, and his spotless sacrifice was sealed before he ever did anything. People say, well, he was all human. Well, if he didn't have some teenage boy stuff going on, how can you say that he is fully human? If he walked around like a robot, and some of those ladies in those robes, goodness gracious, they had to be pretty nice looking. But see, and I do say things like that for shock effect, because we've got to shake this thing out of people's brains that Jesus was righteous because he wasn't human. Well, if he wasn't human, then he wasn't the perfect sacrifice either.
Right.
So Paul says he was touched with the feelings of our infirmities, and he experienced every weakness that we had. Now I feel sorry for Jesus.
Yeah.
It's like, my gosh, he experienced my weaknesses and Daniel's. Well, that's too much for anybody. So.
Yeah. But that's a power cast right there.
It is. And so it is, my friends.
Yeah. But we are back in Genesis.
Yeah, we are.
This is our third session going into Genesis chapter 49, which is an incredible prophecy. Actually, it's very credible. It's a very credible prophecy from Jacob to his 12 sons, who would then become the 12 nations of Israel, Jacob being Israel. These would be the 12 sons. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we talked about the last days. We put that in its right place, that the last days, according to the Hebrew scriptures, is not in the future for us here sitting in 2025, but it is during and culminating at the end of the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And you look at every reference that we went through in the Hebrew scriptures, and they all point to that period of time and ending in the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. These are the last days.
Yes, and when he says these, he's talking about these that we went through, not these.
Yeah. not right now. Correct. Yeah.
So, but Daniel, we went through every single one of them, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Mm-hmm.
And we read them, and we read their context, and every one of them was talking about what would happen after verse 10. And it's absolutely amazing, the continuity, the clarity, the consistency of it all. People say, but yeah, you guys are the only ones that teach this. Well, truth should be known by its consistency and its appeal to your understanding of truth. If it's just one person sharing it, I mean, folks, do you realize that every major understanding about science, about medicine, about geography, that all of these made their major break away from antiquated ways of thinking through one person? Every one of them. See, and now we want the whole choir to join in, or it's not truth. Oh, you're saying everybody is wrong. Well, just like everybody was wrong about gravity until Newton. Yes. Just the very same way. Yes, everybody's wrong. And but now we're not trying to prove you wrong. I'm sorry, you're wrong, and the gospel proves you wrong.
Yeah.
We don't have to prove anybody wrong. You're wrong by default. There's nothing that Christianity teaches, nothing, nothing that Christianity teaches that lines up with the gospel. And this powerful gospel that Paul brought us. And you're going to find, leaping ahead to the end of this, which we're not going to do, you're going to be blown away after our understanding that we've come into about Paul's inclusion into the prophetic, the end of this prophetic time, and how he was included. He is called out. He is singled out. His personality is described. His role is described. Oh, my goodness. That's not even for today.
And I doubt you're going to be able to do that. I guess we'll see.
Well, now I'm doubting it myself. So.
let's just, for review's sake, let's look here at Genesis chapter 49 and starting in verse 1. And Jacob called his sons and said, "Gather together, that I may tell you what shall befall you in the last days.
Mm-hmm.
Gather together and hear, you sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel, your father."
Then he goes through several of these guys, which we went into, so we're not going to recover that again. But we do want to restate that Jacob is here at this beginning of the 12 tribes of Israel. The 12 tribes of Israel are the 12 sons of Jacob. Remember, he's sitting on the side of the bed, not laying down. And he's telling them, this is what's going to befall you, you 12, not you 12 individuals. But as he explains here, this is these 12 tribes being established and what was going to happen to them in the last days. So there, and he includes, he takes them, he even takes them up to their exile.
Mm-hmm.
He takes them through their bondage. He takes them through everything. Now, these guys individually were already dead.
Right.
But their descendants, the tribes that came out of each one of them, were alive.
Mm-hmm.
So he's trying to show this continuity of genealogy that is carrying us through prophecy. Genealogy is carrying us through prophecy. And genealogy is a wonderful thing. Without prophecy, it's not very interesting. And prophecy just is not understandable without genealogy. And we have the other thing that's involved, and that is the law and the scriptures. That this is laid out as a huge, massive, beautiful picture. It is beyond Rembrandt or Michelangelo or any one of the other artists and sculptors, because this is sculpted in a way and painted in a way in Genesis chapter 29 that is irrefutable. All you got to do is look at it.
Genesis 49.
What did I say?
29.
Oh my gosh. Genesis 49. See, I was already leading you astray.
Should I be like Don? 49.
Yeah, exactly. No, you weren't close enough to the mic, and you weren't loud enough. I mean, it was like a voice from God that rattled the room whenever I made a mistake, which I'd appreciated. So, Daniel, this, so we've got this. The other thing that we went into is because it is, I think it just is very much a part of this, because what we end up with is 3 of the tribes are completely separated from.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to go into the details about that again because we've already done that. But these 10 tribes, and then they married, and according to this, and according to history, they married off into Gentiles.
Mm-hmm.
So people that are looking for the lost tribes, they're so lost, you don't know when it's a Gentile or a Jew anymore when it comes to these 10 tribes.
Mm-hmm.
They're gone. They were divorced. But then that ties them into the Gentiles. Now that's very important that they married into Gentiles.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is a picture of, because God was going to bring in all of Israel at the end.
Yeah.
Well, now they're all married into Gentiles. So what does God have to do then by default? He has to bring in all the Gentiles just to get all the Jews. So they've married off. You've got 10 tribes that's just what it says. They all married off into Gentiles.
Mm.
And so you couldn't find them. So how are you going to save them? You just have to save everybody then. How are we going to find these 10 tribes that we divorced? I divorced her. But now, even though it's an absolute sin to marry back somebody you've divorced, according to the God who made the rules, he's now going to marry back the ones he divorced. The problem is they're more than half Gentile. That by this time they might not even be a 10th Jewish. But what do? You're going to have to redeem the Gentiles also if you're going to get all of the Jews.
It's kind of like God had a big plan for everybody.
Big old plan that we've just glanced over, and we're just trying to make sure that you get your backache healed, and you go to these fake services, and you give Benny Hinn. Benny Hinn stopped collecting tithes, but I think it's because he realized that was limited to 10%, and he wanted more.
I need enough in this.
I don't want 10%. We're going to 20 now. All right. 10% is unscriptural. 20 has now become scriptural. Anything that Benny has learned about the gospel, we are glad he has advanced. And so have a couple of others that have seen the light, and started saying little things, but then they go right back to the manipulation and control. Joseph Prince. Gosh, I could go through a line of people that I have influenced over the decades, and they've had major impacts. But when they saw what I saw, it affects your following and it affects your pocketbook.
Mm-hmm.
They turned around and went back. I didn't have enough sense to turn around and go back.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we're asking you for $100 a month from 20 people. Jesus. Yeah. Do you know what that is to Kenneth Copeland Ministries or Andrew Womack, who also learned the gospel of grace and gospel of peace from me?
They can't even buy toilet paper for their facilities.
Oh, dear Lord, no. It wouldn't even begin to do that. And we're not suggesting they go without toilet paper. So for our sakes, we would donate to make sure they have enough. All right. Daniel's already taken us into the gutter here, so I've got to get us
out. You started talking about these 3 tribes that have, during the 1,000-year reigns that are together. And, that is the tribe of Judah, the tribe of Levi. We talked about Levi a little bit last week. Yeah. We'll talk about them more today. And the tribe of Benjamin. Now, I want to make a mention about the tribe of Levi, because you do the math, you say, Michael said there was 10 tribes, and now you're saying there's 3 tribes that stay together. That math don't work out. That's 13. Well, that's the thing about the Levi tribe, which we talked about last week, and it was even in this prophecy here in Genesis 49, that they would be divided in the land of Jacob and scattered in Israel.
Yes.
So that's what happened to the Levites.
They become a non-tribe.
Yeah. And though some of them were in Israel with Judah and Benjamin because of the priesthood, some of them also were intermingled with the rest of the other tribes. So that's why they're considered the 10 tribes and not the 9, because not all of Levi was together with Judah and Benjamin.
And you know that we have people who go on and do little things. We just know, we want to show you that the Hebrew scriptures, they can't be trusted. It says that there was 12 and there's obviously 13. And they hook people with this.
Yeah.
I won't say words that I'm not going to say. But they hook people with this to diminish and call them those old Jewish writings.
Yeah.
And we're quoting Francois Dutoit. Let me tell you, folks, this speaking down about the Hebrew scriptures, if there was an angry God, I'm telling you, you couldn't speak against the Hebrew scriptures before. Now you can. And you can go on and talk about your mystic views of the reality of the work of Christ and turn him into what Francois and his cohorts have. And that is that Jesus could have been anybody. It could have been anybody's blood. Lydia got on the other day and said, she was just stargazing smitten. And I love Lydia. She's a great lady. She's been in my home, her and her husband. But she was just stargazing smitten in talking about the rapturous feeling that she got. And she knows that James got when he finally realized that Jesus and he had the same Father. Wow. And she wasn't talking about God. She was talking about these people that started spreading this false rumor. These aren't her words, but this is what she had to be the logic behind that. That people did start the rumor that Jesus was born of a virgin. Well, my poor James.
Mm.
It just must have broken his heart to think that Jesus wasn't his full brother. But then the rapture's moment that James realized that's all a lie.
Mm.
Jesus is my full brother. And thanks for playing. But I'm sorry, that's deceptive, misleading, and it's wrong. And you're insulting the work of the cross, Christ, and everybody else. Can nice people insult the work of the cross? You've got two doing it that I can tell you about. And that's Francois and Lydia and Andre Robbie and goodness gracious, our Global Grace friend, Don Keithley, and stripping Christ of his basic identity according to the scriptures. And everything is a personal, private revelation. We haven't given you one single thing that's personal, private revelation. Not one, not a single one. We either find it in the scriptures or it's not there. They think you have to. Why do they speak down about the scriptures? Because the scriptures prove them wrong. And I had somebody tell me that they were kind of trying to get some answers from, I think it was from Andre. I can't say for sure, but it was one of the guys. And they were asking about the anger and the wrath of God and just engaging in please help me here. And the guy came back, whichever one it was, and said, "Oh, this is so exhausting. You're burning up my brain cells trying to talk about this stuff." Okay, let's move on. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole, and I'm going to want to smack some people around. Yeah, it does make me, because I'm telling you, doing despite to the Spirit of grace and calling the blood of the covenant wherewith we were sanctified an unholy thing. I'm sorry. I've got every verse in the Bible to tell you that our mystic friends are wrong. And they say, oh, well, we're just living by the teachings of Jesus. Well, Jesus thought you ought to live by the teachings of Paul. That's what Jesus said. Jesus said, this is my chosen man. I am going to reveal the mystery to him, not to anybody of the other disciples. I'm going to reveal this mystery to Paul, and he is going to share the remainder of this with the world. I'm getting into the end of this chapter, and I don't mean to. But Paul was given this job. Paul, he exclaims himself throughout his writings that he was called before he ever came from his mother's womb. Do you know Jeremiah is the only other one to claim such a thing? And so Paul's involvement is absolutely, you want to get rapturous feeling? Do as the book of Hebrews says, another amazing writer in the New Testament, and leave behind the teachings of Christ.
Yeah.
Which they're not there to profit anybody. All of those teachings were fulfilled at the cross.
Come on.
All of Jesus's teachings were fulfilled at the cross. What about the parables? Fulfilled at the cross. I don't know all the parables. I don't understand all the parables, but I know that they were fulfilled at the cross. They have nothing to do with today. They have nothing to do with how you should be living your life. They have the teachings of Jesus have nothing to do with how you ought to live. Whoa. Maybe we should sign off now. Jesus brought up things that you can never measure up to. Jesus said, if you, let's go through the law and let's talk about it. Let's talk about it just a little bit. You know, it once said, don't commit adultery. Take this one and try this one on. If you even look at somebody and have an ounce of lust, you are a breaker of every commandment in the book.
Whew.
Oh, yeah. Well, I just do my best to live by the teachings of Christ. You liar.
Yeah.
You liar. You and nobody else on this planet lives by the teachings of Christ. All right. I'm already Come on, Daniel, grab the oars and get us out of here.
Genesis 49. So Jacob is here with his 12 sons, and he's talking to them about what is going to happen in the last days. Now, what we're have started to read and what we'll continue to read is an 800-year period of time between this prophecy and the beginning of the 1,000-year reign of Christ. It'll go through the duration of the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And all of these events that we are reading, as Michael said, not only do they apply to the 12 sons, but also their descendants.
Yes.
And so we see some of that happening during the 800 years before the 1,000 years. And then we see more of it happening during the 1,000 years, culminating at the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. We've already looked at Simon and Levi and Reuben last week, and we started to introduce Judah.
Yes.
And let's pick up there today. I'll go back to verse 8 where it starts with Judah. It says, Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp from the prey, my son. You have gone up. He bows down, he lies down as a lion. And as a lion, who shall rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be.
Oh, you talk about breathtaking, man. Stop thinking about whether or not James was just thrilled when he found out Jesus was his full brother. I mean, come on, people. Come on. Really, really, really. You're wonderful people. Try to learn something and show some respect for the Hebrew scriptures, for God's sakes. So here we have 3 verses about Judah. So Judah begins to take center stage here in this prophetic chapter in Isaiah chapter 49. And we are introduced to Judah as being the lion. We're going to be going on down where there's others that are identified by different things. Their spirit animal. I'm sorry, I just had to do it. The lion was Jesus' spirit animal. Oh, Lord, where did that come from? I mean, heresy just goes flying everywhere around here.
Yeah.
But this is now when you're asking, so when did this scepter first show up? I mean, there were other people and other kingdoms long before this one. When does the scepter that God hands out, when did this scepter first arrive? It first arrives prophetically with David. So when this says in chapter 49, verse 10, the scepter shall not depart from Judah. Well, the scepter has to get to Judah first.
Yeah.
And that scepter is very clearly handed by God to David 800 years from now. That's why this is a prophecy. We know it is a prophecy because we know where this implementation, this handing of this the handing of this scepter took place. And now, the thing that we also know is that just because this scepter is handed out many years after the law, this scepter doesn't take away the law because the law remains between his feet. Yes, he has a scepter. And what is that scepter, Daniel? Do we have anything that tells us and describes this scepter?
That is Psalm chapter 45 and verse 6. Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. A scepter of righteousness is the scepter of your kingdom.
Wow. And this is a scepter of righteousness. Now, you can do, I remember 20 years ago, 30 years ago, doing a teaching on the scepter and the fact that the scepter was a scepter of righteousness. This is when I was just beginning to learn some things about grace and the difference between the old and the new covenant. Isn't that crazy? You have to learn the difference because Christianity doesn't teach you. It's all one big book, a big happy book, and then we get taught that the New Testament is Scripture. Jesus. So this scepter, this is the thing about a scepter. One of the many things about a scepter. Whatever that scepter represents, that a king can hand that scepter to the most common dirtbag in his kingdom. Not that there's any dirtbags in anybody's kingdom. But he could hand it to the lowliest of low, the poorest of poor, the sickest of sick, the most sinful of the most sinful. And when he's got that scepter in his hand, he is the king.
Mm-hmm.
He is recognized as king. He is recognized as the authority when he takes that scepter, because the king needs to get a message to somebody in the next country. And he needs somebody to run with it. He doesn't need somebody just to run with the message and might get caught up stopping at the tavern on the way or something. So he passes this scepter to them. Everybody knows not only does he have the power to walk through and over anybody and anything, everybody stands back and says, there's the scepter. Oh my, they bow, and the person goes on through, even if he is the biggest sinner in town or the biggest alcoholic, because it's whose hand is on the scepter.
Mm.
And so this scepter for this period, 1,000-year period of reign, will not depart from Judah. So we could go into Daniel. There's other prophecies and statements made after the fact of the scepter that was passed on to Daniel, the scepter of righteousness. And this was the beginning of the 1,000-year reign. It is conclusive. It is not speculative. It is not a divine revelation for me or Daniel. This is research.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing what Jesus said to do. He said, search the scripture because it's all about me. What are we finding out about? These scriptures are all about Jesus.
Yeah.
Now, it says, now listen to this. What does it say about Judah in verse 8? Thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise. Jesus. Thy hand shall be in the neck of thine enemies. Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Thy father's children shall bow down before thee. Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all of these things can transpose from the fixed place that they take, but they're all prophetic about Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And we went into this verse 8 with you, and it had some divine things to say. And but now we are here seeing the scepter come into view and into play.
You know, it's interesting in this one verse, verse 10, we have the entirety, the beginning, the middle, and the end of the 1,000-year reign, all in one verse.
Yeah.
We see the scepter being handed to David. We see that the law is kept between his feet. Then we see Shiloh coming, the Messiah coming, and then we see the gathering of all the people. That is the summary of the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And, you know, we've been talking about now for, I think this is episode number 27 of the 1,000-year reign of Christ. So for 27 weeks, we've been talking about this 1,000-year reign of Christ, the pageantry of it, and all the kings that have come and gone, all the rulers that have come and gone, and the prophecies of all of these kings and priests that have gone. And what we're following in that is this scepter, the scepter that was handed in. And what are we showing in that is not just the individual people, but that the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the Christ that was ruling over all of these kings and priests.
It is true. And Daniel, not only does this cover the 1,000 years and its wrap up, now it says that the scepter will not depart from him, nor the lawgiver from between his feet until.
Mm-hmm.
So this is saying that there is a time that this is going to come to an end. This scepter stays there. The law stays intact and doesn't leave. The one holding the scepter, the law stays there. Jesus made sure that we understood that the law was still intact, even while he was teaching, until Shiloh. Now, here's the weird thing about this term. It is known to mean, it's an epithet for the Messiah.
Yeah.
But it's the only place it's used in the entire Bible.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite amazing to see this singular word used like this. You're not going to find many like that. So what it means is vitally important. And then, but once Messiah comes, which Messiah is there to put an end to the law. Messiah is there, come to fulfill the law and the prophets. And then what is he going to do? Then he's going to gather all the people unto himself. And that gathering together is the beginning of his eternal reign.
Mm-hmm.
Now, folks, we're not making this up. This is all here in one verse.
Yeah.
We have the 1,000-year reign, the beginning and the until. And then the until, we know exactly what happens. That's when the Messiah is the incarnate Christ. We are talking about Christ during the 1,000-year reign before his incarnation through a virgin birth. He existed even before the 1,000-year reign, but he took up residence over the kings of all of Israel, whether they were good ones or bad ones, foreign ones or whatever. Jesus was still over them. We're going to show that to you in this. We may get to it in this. I don't know to it or not. But it stays there with him until, everybody shout until. There you go. And until Messiah comes. So this is the beginning. Now, how do you know this is the beginning of the 1,000-year reign and goes all the way through? Folks, the scepter was handed to David 1,000 years before the Messiah came.
Mm-hmm.
Before the Messiah came and fulfilled all law and all prophecy. This is not our timetable. This timetable is established throughout the entire Bible.
Yeah.
And the scepter was handed to David. It's called a scepter of righteousness. And that righteousness, that David was the type and shadow of Christ. And he is called the Son of David. How many times? I mean, goodness gracious. Jesus, thou Son of David, have mercy upon us. They knew who they were looking at. They knew who had been incarnate amongst them was David himself. Because David was Christ.
Yeah.
And he remained in rule in over and above all the kings. And you can see it. All you got to do is read the stories and you see. Just like Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was not a called man of God. In fact, he was everything but. But look where Christ shows up during the rule of a very cruel, vicious king. He is the man in the fiery furnace with Daniel during Nebuchadnezzar's reign. He is the lion in the lion's den. That he got thrown into the Jesus den. And no wonder they didn't hurt him. It was in the Jesus den. And then you have one like the Son of Man. Didn't we throw 3 in there? There's one that looks just like the Son of God in there. My God, what's happening here? Well, if you're with him and he's with you, you ain't burning. Right? So, and Nebuchadnezzar tried to change this vision of that he was only the head. He established a statue and built it all out of gold. That means it's all about him. Isn't that what all of us want to do? It's all about me. It's all about me. Well, Nebuchadnezzar, sorry. even you, along with Francois and the rest of them, cannot change prophecy. You cannot change the scripture. Now, you guys think I'm being very mean and harsh. I am being kind to tell these folks that you are out of bounds. You are out of line. And you have stepped beyond anything that has anything to do with Jesus Christ, the manifested Son of God, born of a virgin, died on the cross to rid the world of sin and establish righteousness. You have no clue who that is. You have no clue who that is. So we are having mercy upon you and being the only ones probably able to tell you how wrong you are. But we're going to let the scriptures tell you how wrong you are. We don't even have to tell you how wrong you are. But here in this one line, my gosh, but it's in a line in a chapter that is so definitively clear. And we see this powerful thing taking place for 1,000 years. Now, and everybody's, do you know that every eschatological teaching that is out there puts the 1,000-year reign as an amillennial, which means, it just means everything after the cross is the millennium. Well, he's coming after the unimaginable number. That's what they mean. Oh, we're not going to set a time for the return of Christ. It's a millennial. Oh, it could be 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. We don't know. But we know at the end of the 1,000-year reign, Jesus is going to come back and do it right this time. That's as best as you get out of Christianity is amillennialism. No, the best you get is preterism. Amillennialism is the second best.
Yeah.
And then the other two are, the 1,000-year reign is a definitive amount of time. We don't know when it's going to start. They first started it when Jesus died. Peter started it. The apostle Peter started the 1,000-year reign. And I might have to tell you also that our brother Apollos seems to have been caught up in this with the disciples in the 1,000-year reign. And they thought that was the beginning of the 1,000-year reign. And then Jesus was going to come back. But that 1,000 years kind of expired. And Peter was trying to clean up the mess because Jesus said he was coming back soon. And when soon didn't happen, he said, you guys need to stop this. Get off my back about what I said. It's just like I saw Kenneth Copeland yesterday. We have a decree to make about Kenneth Copeland. Kenneth Copeland just said he has a covenant with God, between him and God.
Wow.
I mean, this man's amazing. He has a private covenant with God. And his private covenant with God is that he will die in 2056 and he mentions his birthday because he will be exactly 120 years old. And he says that's a prophecy. 120 years is not a prophecy. 120 years was a judgment, not a promise. 120 years was a judgment that was coming, not a promise of long life. Oh my gosh, the idiocy of this. So, but he has said he wants you to know, I'm going to be here. I'm going to let you know the day I'm going to die. And he openly said he was going to be 120 years old when he died because he had a covenant with God. Let me declare this unto you. If Kenneth Copeland dies before he is 120, this is what it will mean. It will mean everything he ever taught was a lie. I decree that if Kenneth Copeland dies before he is 120 years old, it will conclusively be a manifestation that everything this man ever taught was a lie. Because he teaches about these covenants between God and him and God and us. We have no covenant between God and us, much less as an individual. The covenant was between God and Christ. We live in the results of the covenant. We don't have a covenant relationship with God. Maybe we shouldn't stay off air for a whole week. So, goodness, we've condemned everybody out there. I say we, it hasn't been Daniel. And I'm not condemning these people. I'm condemning their stupidity in the scriptures and what the scriptures have to say. Somebody's got to open their mouth and warn them. You're about to make a freaking fool out of yourself more than what you already have. This stuff's crazy, folks. And all we're showing you is this is very simple. So, and the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until the Messiah comes. And unto the Messiah shall the gathering of all the people be, the eternal reign.
Yeah. Well, let's look at that scepter until Shiloh comes, until the Messiah comes. Because we have a record of all of this, and it's all laid out in prophecy, and it's all laid out in a 1,000-year period of time.
In those old Jewish writings?
In them old Jewish writings. My goodness. So starting with David, we have 586 years of kings that have come from his line, the line of Judah, which is the line of David. 21 kings. So 586 years, and you can go through and you can read all of those kings. And then from that point, after that 21 kings, now we see the foreign rule. And you might say, hey, hold on a second. I thought that scepter wasn't going to pass from Judah. It didn't. Because this is the really interesting thing. And this is why we focused in on Nebuchadnezzar's dream and the prophecy that Daniel had. Because that outlays God's plan for all of this. Because what do we see within Nebuchadnezzar's dream? We see not only Nebuchadnezzar's part as the golden head that lasted for 70 years, but also we see the Persian and the Greek rule, all leading up to the time where the iron and the clay feet were shattered. So that is now, we have 586 years of David's king. Then we have the exile, and then we have the command to rebuild the temple. We have the 490-year prophecy, the 70 weeks of Daniel. Starting at 583, we see the Persian and Greek rule. All of that leads up to 140 BC, which we have the Hasmonean dynasty. Now, this is where it gets interesting. This is what I think is the law between his feet, because the Hasmonean dynasty is not kings out of the line of David or kings out of the line of Judah, but these are now the Levites. These are the Levites that were put in charge of the temple. This is where temple worship is going on. This is where the enforcement of the law is happening. And all of that's happening up until 63 BC, where Herod comes into play. And now the interesting thing that we talked about with Herod is, even though Herod wasn't a Jew, what did he do? He married into the Jewish family. And who did he marry? He married the granddaughter of the last high priest. Yeah. Her name was Miriamne, and the great high priest was Hyrconius. And then not only did Herod do this, but also his 3 sons also married Jewish women for political reasons. And what does that bring us up to? So not only do we have Nebuchadnezzar, we have the Persian and the Greeks, but then with this combination between the Romans and the Levites, now we see the feet of iron and clay. And where does that lead us up to? You recognize the name Herod. That was the time when Jesus was born.
The little horn.
Yeah.
And the other prophecy that we went through.
Yeah.
Very clearly, and our preterist friends take that off to the other line of one of the 3 Herod's sons, and then it delays it. But this man is not mentioned in scripture or prophecy at all. He's completely inconsequential. The preterism latches on. I wish I had the name in front of me, but they latch on to a name. They've made it big and they've made it great. but that man has no identification even in history. He's insignificant. The significance of everything went down through this side of Herod's descendants, even to Christ, who Christ even told him, as we've shared with you before. He told him, Jesus standing there before the king, and he told him, he says, don't you know that I have the power to take your life or give you life? And Jesus told him, said, you'd have no power at all if it didn't come from above. I'm just learning. Gosh, we're learning as we go. Nebuchadnezzar, during his time, it does say that God placed him there.
Yeah. And
that he would be granted dominion. But it's a temporary dominion that God granted him. And it says, I've given unto thee lands into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant. He called him his servant. So just the same as all of those on the other side that were in the hands of God, even the devil was played out in the hands of God.
Yeah.
And Nebuchadnezzar could be seen as a great type and shadow of Satan himself. But God used that. It makes a little bit more sense when God says, I've created both evil and the good. Nebuchadnezzar was evil. And God placed him in this position. His rule was not a divine rule. It was over nations. This is not the scepter that was handed to David. The scepter that Nebuchadnezzar, that God gave him was, he said, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, my servant, and the beast of the field have I given him also to serve him. And all the nations will serve him. So he gave him cows. Says, enjoy your rule. But he also had power over the nations. And I think that just means Gentiles. Because he did not have power over the kingdom of Judah. He had power over the Gentiles. Now, they tried to exercise that power, and as Daniel's gone through this wonderful history lesson for you in lineage, Nebuchadnezzar ruled over the Gentiles, and it shows clearly through his experience with Daniel that he wasn't ruling over Daniel. He wasn't ruling over the tribe of Judah. He tried to have him thrown in the lion's den, and lions wanted McDonald's that day. And then we have him being thrown into the fire. The Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being thrown in the fiery furnace. They were of the tribe of Judah. And he obviously didn't have authority over them either. Nebuchadnezzar only had authority over the Gentiles and the goats. And it was a temporary rule for him. And it's prophesied in Daniel chapter 2, verse 37 and 38. And the strength and the glory, the children of men, the beasts of the field, and the fowls of heaven, have been given into thy hand, and hath made thee ruler over all of them. Thou art this head of gold. And that is Daniel explaining to him this vision. And Daniel tells him that his placement here was by God. But then it goes on to explain in Daniel 2, verse 44, that kingdom would be crushed by a kingdom not made with hands. So, and that, of course, was way beyond. That's actually the extension of this. And like I said, Nebuchadnezzar didn't like that vision, so he changed it into a golden from head to toe. Didn't work.
And Christianity is doing the same thing. I remember when I went, I was telling you this last night, Michael, I learned all of this in Bible school, but I didn't have a place to put it.
Yeah.
It was just information that was thrown at us. Yeah, there's 21 kings, and then there's Nebuchadnezzar and blah, 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 blah. And just the information was put in there, but I had no context. Wow. And that's the power of the 1,000-year reign of Christ, is now I have a place and I have a position to realize and understand all of this served a purpose. But I remember us going through Nebuchadnezzar's dream and all of this. And yeah, they would say, yeah, this was the Babylonian exile. This was the Persians. This was the Greek. And we didn't know about the iron and the clay. That's hot off the press from the Gospel Revolution. You're welcome. And we learned about all of those places. But they said, but it also means Russia and China and blah, blah, blah. And all of this future fulfillment of what Jesus would do when he came back.
So they are the modern day Nebuchadnezzars of the interpretation of the vision.
Yes, sir.
So Nebuchadnezzar turned it into one of gold, and the Christians have turned it into one of crap. Sorry.
They wanted to make it about themselves.
They've got to make it about them. But see, that's the very same Nebuchadnezzar did. He wanted it to be about himself. Christianity, all of Christianity, makes this vision of this Nebuchadnezzar. They make it about them just exactly the way Nebuchadnezzar made it about himself.
Wow. There was someone else who did that too. Hitler?
Yeah. Hitler tried to do a 1,000-year reign. Well, I've done as much research in it. They don't really identify. Of course, it would be offensive for ChatGPT to say, oh, yeah, he was a type of Christ. But he was a type of Christ. They don't want to offend the Christians. I mean, there's so much information on there to downplay that. But the fact of it is, Hitler had more Christ-like imagery to him, doing a 1,000-year reign, 1,000-year Reich. It's the very same thing. And all the imagery, I was in his temple in Germany, where he and the SS would meet. And this was an amazing room. It was all stone and round. It was in a circle, and it had this altar-looking thing in the middle of the room. And there is a hole in the ceiling of this dome. And it's really weird because the light, no matter what time of day, from sun up to sundown, the light shines straight down on that table all day long.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. If you're not trying to look for a Christ-type figure, what do you do that for? What we're telling you is anything outside of accepting this for what it says, you're just going to bring grief and destruction to people. And, if you believe that Russia or anybody else is the big bad bear and it's inevitable to come, you might just submit to Russia. It's like, oh, well, it's prophesied. I guess we should just roll over and let it happen. I don't know what people do with this farcical view of this image of Nebuchadnezzar that happened during the 1,000-year reign of Christ and ended at the end with the rock striking the feet. This intermarriage. I mean, if you can't see the iron and clay mixed together after Daniel took you through all this factual stuff, do your own search on it. Ask about the mixture. If you just do a mixture of iron and clay, that most of us not going to know about. But go in and look and see who Herod married. He killed her. She hated him. All of the kings, all of his descendants, he and all of his descendants married Jewish women to try to give them validity as kings over Israel. And the iron and the clay would not mix until a rock comes out of heaven, hits the Mount of Olives and destroys this whole thing. Judaism was destroyed, folks. You say, well, Rome wasn't destroyed until 70 AD. Rome was destroyed that day, the very same way Judaism was destroyed. Did anything physical change about Judaism? Well, we know that according to the Talmud, the doors wouldn't work no more in the temple. I mean, here you have these huge solid rock doors, probably weighed tons. And it took a lot of people to open them or to close them. And every time they went back, they were open again. Now, this is recorded to have happened on the day that Jesus died, not by Christians. These were people who had rejected Christ who wrote this. Oh,
Wow. I want to just take a minute and tie the line from David to Christ. And there are some New Testament verses that I don't think we've shared really in this whole series that we've done that really take us all the way from David all the way to Christ and show that that there's this tie, this scepter has been connected to David
yes.
and connected to the Christ. The first one is in Matthew 21 and verse 9. And this is really interesting because this is all of the people. And they're in the street shouting, Jesus is coming in. He's riding on the donkey. And he's walking past the multitudes of people. Then the multitudes who went before and those who followed cried out, saying, Hosanna, the Son of David.
Wow.
Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord.
Mm-mm.
Hosanna in the highest.
The continuation here, the Messiah has arrived. And guess what he still has between his feet? The law.
Yeah.
He made it very clear that the law was still in effect. But you want to live by his teachings, you're going to have to live by the law. What is following the teachings of Jesus? It's called living under the law.
Yeah. And then, of course, Luke chapter 1 and verse 30. Then the angel said to her, Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. And you will conceive in your womb and bring forth a son, and he shall be the son of Joseph. Oh, wait, no, sorry.
Oh.
The brother of James.
Oh, poor James. You're breaking James's heart again.
Wrong translation. And behold, you shall conceive in your womb and bring forth a son, and shall call his name Jesus. He will be great, and he will be called the Son of the Highest, not the son of Joseph. And the Lord God will give him the throne of his father David.
His father David.
And he will reign over the house of Jacob forever. And of his kingdom there will be no end.
Wow. So if David is his father, that's all you need to show an unbroken line of the scepter of righteousness. It didn't say, and David is your 10th great grandfather.
Right.
It said your father David.
And then, of course, Revelation 5:5. But one of the elders said to me, Do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and to loose its 7 seals.
Wow. And that, I hope, gosh, we've already gone into that. Daniel, was that knowing that this qualification, who it was, and that he opened these 7 seals, and then us knowing what those 7 seals were? And then that came, was that the one that came after he had already gathered all the people in?
That was actually part of the gathering.
Part of the gathering. Yeah,
yeah, that last seal was actually where all of the saints were presented in heaven, and their robes were washed in the blood.
And the marriage supper of the Lamb and all of that. Then after that, we see the cutting off. My gosh.
Yeah.
Folks, do you know how fortunate you are? Do you know how fortunate we are? That we have any glimpse at all into this. I'm perfectly, God, we want to learn from other people. And I know that some of you saying, well, Francois and Lydia and all these guys, they don't say things about you and Daniel. You know why they don't? Because they are afraid. They are afraid we will answer their documentation about what we teach. But the thing of it is amongst these folks, they think that I insult the gospel because I am a gay man preaching the gospel. That's an insult to the grace of God. And I'm telling you, it's an absolute insult to the grace of God that because I'm a gay man, that you cannot accept that I'm also righteous and holy. That's the insult to the gospel. It's not my sexuality or your inabilities or your faults or your all of your stuff or anybody else's stuff. It's that with all the stuff, we are still the righteousness of God in Christ because of the culmination of this 1,000-year reign. And now we exist in the eternal reign of Christ. And that reign is a reign of righteousness. It cannot be interrupted. It cannot be interrupted by thieves or robbers. It cannot be interrupted by, even if you're a Catholic priest, that can't stop the effectiveness of the cross. And if anything ought to have stopped the effectiveness of the cross, it's be a part of a church that has sanctioned and protected pedophiles. You want to get mad at somebody? Get mad at those who have protected for hundreds of years pedophiles within their ranks.
Yeah.
I met one of them when I was a kid too. And don't. Yes, I am a gay man, and I am holy and righteous and perfect in Christ.
Yes, sir.
And Daniel's a straight man. And my God, I don't know how, but he's righteous and holy and perfect in Christ. I just don't know how straight people make it.
So the dynastic rule of the kings would no longer be necessary when the eternal rule began.
Yes.
And we see Jesus walking into this. So we see Hosanna, son of David. But then the prophecy along with that is that your kingdom will be forever and ever.
Yeah.
It'll have no end.
Yeah.
And listen to what Paul said about the work of Christ in 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 24. Then comes the end. The end. Remember, Jacob talked about the last days? Then comes the end when he delivers the kingdom to God, the Father, and he puts an end to all rule, all authority, and all power.
Wow. So when it identifies him as King of Kings, what kings if all authority has been laid to waste?
Oh, isn't that you and me?
Well, I can tell you.
Oh, king.
Yeah, we're not talking about how we feel about ourselves. We're talking about kings. Now, Charles, I hate to tell you this. Charles and Camilla, Charles, I hate to tell you, you are not the continuation of the throne of Christ. You or any of your cohorts that came before you. You had a great mom. Seemed to be like she was a really great lady. Ruled 70, 80 years or something like that. Seems to have done a great job. But she was not appointed by God for that. And neither are you, Charles. Neither are you. And neither is the next son that's going to come and the other son that gets thrown away. The spare, that's what they always called them throughout all these hundreds of years. The first son was the one that was going to be king, and the rest of them were called a spare. It might create a little bit of tension there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just the spare, King Henry VIII was a spare. King Henry VIII's brother, Arthur, was married to the Princess of Spain. And Catherine of Spain. Arthur was married, and he was supposed to take the throne after his father died. Well, Arthur died after he married Catherine of Spain. And then that's where King Henry VIII, it was supposed to be King Arthur VIII, not Henry. Wasn't he was the spare. And man, I've read the history about it. They said that, man, did Henry enjoy being the spare. He didn't have to do all that garbage. He didn't do anything. He was a roustabout. He played around. He did around. He loved sports, and he went riding and hunting and bucking and everything else. And but then his brother died, and that was the end of his party. The problem is he continued the party after he became king. And he put to death over 20,000 people.
Wow.
Who didn't agree with him. I'm sorry, that's not funny. But why are you laughing then, Michael? The hilarity of this delusion of kingship existing after the cross is ridiculous. And they have made fools out of themselves, one after the other. I'm just calling everybody a fool today, I guess. I don't. So, anyway, Jesus was King of Kings.
Yeah.
And Lord of Lords. We don't have no kings. We don't have no lords anymore. We don't have no bishops no more. We don't have pastors. We don't have elders. All of that is made up out of Ephesians chapter 4, verses that were quoted out of context. And the pseudographical writings added to Paul's is the only affirmation of a church authority structure in the entire New Testament. It does not exist. You will never see Paul talking about, except in this chapter 4, which is pseudographical, declared to be so by us, and then confirmed by ChatGPT. By comparing the writings, the sentence structure, it changes completely. The verbiage in the Greek, the words used in the Greek is completely different. Not Paul. Paul never used those words. Here you say, well, what about the church authority? The church has no authority structure. We are one. And yes, we're talking about a gospel revolution. To what degree? Beyond what we're able to think. I don't know. We're just sharing the truth of the gospel with you. I'm going to leave it here for all the rest of you guys to try to figure out what to do about it. But we are going to share the truth of this gospel. And this is the truth. We know the truth. We don't believe the truth. We know the truth. And the truth we know has made us free.
Now I have a question. So we have the scepter given to David. We see that scepter going through this 1,000-year period of time, comes to Christ. Now Christ puts down all rule, authority, and power. We understand that this is a scepter of righteousness. So Michael, what happens, or what happened to the scepter of righteousness at the resurrection of the Christ?
Well, the imagery that we get is that scepter was passed to the entire human race because we became his righteousness.
Wow.
And man, I tell you what, if you got low self-esteem, you just need the gospel. The scepter of righteousness. And let me tell you something. The only way that scepter can still exist if it exists in the equality of righteousness throughout the human race. You say, but what about mean, bad people? Well, God used Nebuchadnezzar anyway, even while the law was in effect. So don't get all upset and shocked because the morality of your Baptist church is offended by people that every one of them there is lying. Let me say this again. Every Baptist is a liar because they're trying to tell you they are something they are not. They do not keep the commandments. They do not follow the teachings of Christ. Every Baptist is a liar. And you can tell them I said so. Every Baptist is a liar. Every Baptist preacher is a liar. To stand up there and present themselves as though they are somehow following the teachings of Christ and leading this life that is, and folks, haven't you gone through enough of the Bakers and the Jimmy Swaggarts? And here Jimmy Swaggart was just the most righteous man on earth. And my God, they pulled him over in Palm Springs, just down from my home. In Palm Springs, I don't know why I'm always around when some of this crazy crap happens, but right in my near my home, Jimmy Swaggart got pulled over because he was trying to shove pornography under the seat because he was afraid he was going to get pulled over. He wouldn't have got pulled over if he hadn't been weaving the car back and forth trying to shove the pornography in his on his seat under the seat. And that's why he got picked up.
Wow.
And he had been with a prostitute, having her sit on the bed and masturbate for him while he sat in the dark corner.
Mm.
And I've sinned against thee, O Lord. And of course, you'll condemn the hell out of me for being a good man who happens to be gay, and you'll let this scumbag back in the pulpit again.
Mm.
Do you think he changed? Oh yes, he asked Jesus to forgive. Jesus had already forgiven him long before he ever asked.
Yeah.
I don't know what. Did I take drugs or something?
I just watched last night The Greatest Showman, and it's about this guy. He wants to put on this show, but he gathers together all of the so-called freaks. He's got the bearded woman and the little midget who's 22 years old, and the big tall guy, and the dog man, and all of these things. And the story goes on. He puts together this show, and they're all insecure about who they are. They've been laughed at, they've been mocked at, and now he wants to put them on a stage. And one of the lines that he kept telling them over and over again is, they're going to love you. They just don't know that they do yet. So it's when they see you and they see you for who you are, that's when they're really going to love you and appreciate you. And it happened. They became famous, and people came from all over to see him. But the showman lost sight of that, and he went in because he wanted to be in the upper class. And so now he gets somebody who's a singer from across the ocean and brings her over to New York and shows her off and wants to do this tour so that he can be with the high status people, because they would never step foot in his circus. But they would come to this performance. But in doing that, he lost everything else. He lost all of that, and comes back that really the point of all of this is that he realized about himself that he too was kind of a bit of a freak.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that everybody was. And then just an acceptance for everyone for who they are.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing here. The final conclusion to all of this is the gathering of all the people. Even the divorced tribes who went out and intermingled with the so-called freaks and the Gentiles and did things they shouldn't have done. What was the conclusion of it all? That when Messiah showed up, he would gather everyone into himself. And as Michael just said, that scepter of righteousness is now, we are the scepter of righteousness.
Yes.
He who knew no sin became sin that we might become, can we say, the scepter of righteousness?
Yes, we are it. We did not even get the righteousness in the way that Abraham got it. Abraham got a document that said he was righteous. We became the righteousness. So powerful. Well, just call me the bearded lady. I mean, folks, I tell you what. Now, we never get political here, but please don't jump on a bandwagon that condemns people that are different from you. Please don't do that.
Yeah.
I understand you having views and opinions about things. Everybody has a right to them. But when you start being mean to people because they are different, oh no, Mike, it's because they're trying to shove this down our throat. I don't know what's being shoved down your throat. But let me tell you, most people are just trying to live. Just stop and ask yourself, why? Why should we make people feel worse than what they have most of their lives now that they've finally been able to accept themselves as they are? I've been through that, folks, and I'm telling you what, I will not stand with any voice that stands and degrades and condemns people because they are different. Because I is one, I've been one, I went your route, I tried the denial, I did all the false stuff, I lied to the whole world, and I will not be a liar for anybody anymore. And I'm not going to stand up for a bunch of liars who are condemning people because they happen to be different from them.
And look in the mirror. You're different too.
You just don't know how different. We've seen some of you.
I don't know exactly where Naomi got this, but she goes around and she tells people they're weird. And they kind of first get offended. They're learning from Michael, I guess, the shock thing. And she said, but we're all a little weird. I'm weird too. Yeah. Let's close with this. Isaiah chapter 2. What a great place to close, right? With the great prophet Isaiah.
Let's do it.
This is a prophecy about this gathering together of all. Isaiah 2:2. Now it shall come to pass in the latter days. We read this a couple weeks ago, talking about the latter days. That the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it. Many people shall come and say, come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem.
Well, let me point out one little thing here, and that's the term flow and mountain. They're going to flow to the mountaintop. That's totally against nature.
Yeah.
Could one say that was against nature?
Yeah.
To have something flow up a mountain? Let me tell you something. Everything that you decree to be against nature has flowed up that mountain.
Wow.
Whether you like it or not.
And so it is, we must leave you, family and friends. If you'd like to know anything about the Gospel Revolution, or you want to be one of the 20 and make that pledge today, call our office on
832-318-9339.
And speak to us about how you want to participate. Or go to www.gospelrevolution.com and hit the donate button. You can find us on your favorite social media network, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Please be sure to hit that subscribe, share, and like button on whatever platform you are listening. Now it's good night from Daniel Rouse as a weirdo in the frozen tundra.
And from the bearded lady. Good night, folks. And gosh, we do love you. There's so many times I think of so many of you. I was talking to Mel and Denise. I've got a picture of them in my mind sitting at the pool, and it will ever be there. Down in Cullman, Alabama, 15 years ago? I don't even know. And just so many of you that I do have those wonderful photos in my mind. Some of you haven't spoken to me in years. Rowan and Diane Raphael up in Canada, they haven't spoken to me in years. And I think they do support the ministry. At least they have. And we really do appreciate that. But just because I haven't seen you in a long time doesn't mean you're not. You're in my heart, you're in my soul. You know that one, Dan?
No.
You be my breath when I grow old. Oh, I guess I already did that. So let me say this also. We do need your financial support. But I want you to know clearly that if you are offended that people that do not fit your paradigm of what is acceptable, if it offends you that they are righteous and holy, we ask you to discontinue giving to this ministry. We do not want your money. We do not want you to think that we would actually allow that to be a part of this ministry. We're not talking about politics here. We're talking about being accepted by God in Christ across the board. There is no one, current administration included, there is no one who is excluded from the righteousness of God.
We sure hope that you enjoyed today's Powercast. And remember, we'll be here to do the same thing all over again next week, only
weirder.
Since you're knocking on the door, you're begging to come in, yeah. Unawetted off the wild lust been knocking from within. You are the love you seek, a perfect yet unique, righteous and holy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. When you feel lost and alone, staring at the unknown, and these words be the compass that guides you back home. We are one, we are love, we are. Know where you gotta be, nothing to complete. It's not a thing that you need, you're the love. Just remember to breathe and take a second off. Look, I'm just trying to remind you that you're perfectly divine, flawlessly designed. When you feel lost and alone, staring at the unknown, let these words be the compass that guides you back home. We are one, we are love, we are. Yeah, yeah. We are love.
Deconstructing religion and barbecuing the sacred cows of Christianity before your very eyes. You are listening to
The Gospel Revolution.